Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to the Retro Disney World Podcast, the official podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society. This is episode 65, Pleasure Island Part 1, where we'll be taking you back to the early designs and everything behind the scenes that got Pleasure Island on the map at Walt Disney World. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and sitting in with me, as always, this evening as well while we record, Mr. JT Kuzer. How you doing tonight, JT?
I'm great. I'm ready to get fun with the Funmeister, or maybe not tonight. Maybe that's later. Part 4.
We might see him later on a little bit, but yeah. And coming in from Tampa, Florida, Mr. Hal Bowers. How you doing tonight, Hal?
Aloha, doing very well, thank you.
Excellent. You got some new furniture behind you.
I do. We've relocated our home offices. Now that we have one youngling that has flown the coop, it has opened up a new house, a new room in our house. So now I have taken over the rumpus room and have redecorated.
And
so
all those tiki mugs would be the crazed mugs behind you?
Yeah, so I've got to move my tiki mugs into here and some of my artwork, and I'm starting to get some of my Disney art up on the wall that I never had before, so it's really starting to come together.
Looks good, looks good.
Thanks.
And as always, coming in from Philadelphia, Mr. Brian P. Miles. How you doing tonight, Brian?
Greetings and salutations. It's lovely to be here, and when Hal mentioned the home office, all I could think of was those wonderful years when David Letterman would call out the top 10 list from the home office and he would move it to different cities every 6 or 8 months. From our home office in Muncie, Indiana, or something that.
It was hilarious.
Yeah.
One of the best David Letterman skits I remember is somebody wrote into him and asked him, Dave, what happens to the blue cards after you throw them? And this is when he had the model of the city behind him. So he had this skit where Biff Henderson's sitting on a couch and a giant blue card comes in and like impales him on the couch and through the window.
On Friday nights, you're talking about, he would do viewer mail every Friday night. And one of my favorite viewer mails ever. This was late 80s, early 90s. And at the time, Ivory Soap would always run advertisements, commercials that talked about how they were 99.44% pure soap. And it's still that. That's still how they sell Ivory Soap. But somebody wrote in a Dear Dave, and people would always kind of set him up for jokes. Dear Dave, somebody actually wrote him a letter. Ivory's soap is 99.44% pure. What's the other 0.66%? And he's like, well, we have a bar here, and he pulls it out, and he cuts into it, and it's filled with blueberry pie filling. When he opens the bar of soap.
And now we know.
Yeah.
Right? There we go.
I miss David Letterman.
Oh, fantastic show. Fantastic show. That was my go-to, watching late night television. So it's just not the same. It's not the same as it was. But anyway, that's what the show is all about. We always go back and talk about things that are not the same or aren't there anymore. So perfect segue there. JT, a couple people have written into us, I'm sure. We've the Twitter sphere has been lighting up recently.
It's been a busy
Facebook
month.
has been, oh man, we've been getting beeped and bopped all over the place. We got messages coming in, things going in and out. So what do you got coming into us this month, JT?
Well, I find that the busier I am on there, the more responses we get. The more, so maybe I'll shut up a month and I will have less to sift through. But we, as always, we appreciate all of the questions, the comments, the info. I'm going to go through quite a few of these here, and some of them are quick, some of them are more you guys responded to, and we'll get some of those. The first one I have here is from our old pal, Dan. This is the person of the century, Dan, if you forget. Vote for Dan. He said, "Hey guys, I just listened to your podcast on Crescent Lake, and it was great. I actually worked with our guest from that last episode.
Scott Dieter, yeah.
Yep. He says he has a picture of one of the dolphins before it was hoisted onto the hotel, and he wanted to share it with us. So we have this, and it's hilarious because it's you don't get an idea of the size unless you look at this picture. So this would be
it's massive,
and it's got like the big holes in it where they're like lifting it by. And I can't tell. You guys probably noticed this. Is that like, did they fill those holes once it was up there? I assume, or I'm not sure, but it's got like, I don't know what part of the fish that would be lower down, like below the tail. It's all
That's
like
where its red laser eyes were gonna go.
Yeah, I mean it's like these big massive holes where the crane's hooked to it. So we'll post that. But good to hear from you, Dan, and you are still the person of the century for sure.
Do you think it had blueberry pie in it?
Only one way to find out. How just heard pie. That's all. That's all I could be thinking about tonight is pie.
Oh yeah.
All right, How, I'm going to let you get this one because you replied. This is from Jennifer. She says, "Hey guys, love the show. She can't seem to find any information about the walkways around the Magic Kingdom. And I know, Todd, you can touch base on this one too. Have you always been able to walk from the Contemporary to the Magic Kingdom and Polynesian to ticket transportation, walk around the world? You know, because now which you guys have seen, and some of you have been on, the walk to the Grand Floridian from the Magic Kingdom. So How? Go ahead. Tell us your response."
Let me first say, when this email came in, it disrupted all of our day as How and Todd and I started comparing our memories to aerial maps and dated maps from the past and trying to figure out what was changed when, because it all kind of runs together.
And that's how some of these go. So Jennifer, your question like halted production in 3 states, and it really, some of them really get us going. You know, other ones were like, oh yeah, we know the answer right away, and other ones are like some real brain busters. So go ahead, How.
Yeah, so from the very beginning, what we did know right off the top of our heads is that from 1971, you could walk from the Ticketed Transportation Center over to the Polynesian. And then, of course, there was nothing past the Polynesian, so it kind of stopped right there.
And the western side, well, I don't know if I have my directions right, but the one side of the Polynesian, half the buildings that stand now between the Polynesian and the Ticket and Transportation Center weren't there. Those were all buildings added to the Polynesian in subsequent years.
Yes. So you'd walk through a bit of a no man's land and then eventually get to the Great Ceremonial House. Once the Grand Floridian was added, that walkway was extended at least up to the Grand Floridian, but it stopped right there. There was no way to get over. And even when they did the walk around the world with the tiles that you could buy and put your name on, it still really only went that far. On the Magic Kingdom side, you were not able to walk from the Contemporary to the Magic Kingdom until the area where the buses are was redeveloped, I think, several times up until I think into the 1990s. They finally kind of reconfigured that and opened up a walkway. But what I discovered when I was going there was that you had to have a card that you were actually a guest at the Contemporary in order to walk from the Contemporary to the Magic Kingdom. Security would actually stop you. The same security that was there to keep people from driving into the employee parking lot there would actually stop you and ask for your room cards to prove that you were there. So I guess maybe that way you didn't park at the Contemporary and then walk over to the Magic Kingdom. Now you could walk from the Magic Kingdom back to the Contemporary and nobody would question you. But that was sealed off for guests only. And then at some point, I guess in the 2000s, they opened it up, because the last time I happened to be at the Contemporary, I think when we were at a Retro Magic event or something, I walked over and nobody bothered me. On the Magic Kingdom side,
and How I just checked,
go ahead.
I just checked some aerial photography here from 1994, and the pathway was indeed, it's a very odd winding pathway, but it was indeed there in 1994. I've just zoomed in into the 1990 view, and that pathway was not there. So you are correct. It's somewhere in the...
It's a mid-90s edition.
Yeah,
So
it was
that
there in
sounds about-
'94. So it had to be, and I'm seeing construction right now of the bus loop in 1990 where they're expanding that out. So
Okay.
it must have been
That
around
seems to be
92, 93.
Yeah, that seems to be consistent with when I got stopped and frisked.
Could this all be tied in too, though, to the bricks, like the buying of the bricks, like they?
And yeah, part of it was that because they did have an idea, like they promoted that as if you would be able to walk around the entirety of that property. And I thought at the time, like, well, I guess they've always wanted to build a walkway. What a better way than do it than to get a bunch of suckers, I mean good customers, in order to pay for it by buying all the paver bricks.
And it also coincides with when the pace of the vacations increased. So as you remember, prior to that, you would wait for your Disney transportation to take you to your Disney theme park, and you would travel at the speed of the day. And then as you got through the 90s and Fast Pass became a thing, and as I talk about the commando type, that, you know, where we've got a stroller with, you know, 4-day supply in case we get stranded in the parks, and 3 changes of clothes, and, you know, you're out the door at 7 a.m. to get into... You know, the park started extending their hours, and everything just started to move at a much faster pace. That obviously created a strain on the boats, the buses, and the monorail. And so all of a sudden making it convenient for people who were at formerly your flagship hotel, but certainly your second most expensive hotel, to be able to just walk the 7 minutes to the park. Made a lot of sense. And it also alleviated the strain on their transportation system, because the only way, back then it was boat and monorail. There was never a bus between the Contemporary and the Magic Kingdom. So,
yep. And then in front of the Magic Kingdom, the bricks that they put in kind of went in front. They had bricked up the entire plaza with the purchased bricks, and then a path kind of led in front of the monorail platform, around the front, quite a little bit of a distance, up into where there's kind of like a path where they have a roadway that goes in kind of behind Pirates. And then it just kind of dead ended there. And there were some light posts, so you could kind of walk down there. There were times when you could sort of pick up some of the boat transportation. There was like an overflow docks down that way. But it just kind of dead ended there. So it wasn't really the walk around the world never really went around the world. And I don't even think they bricked that area to the Contemporary. I think it really ended up just being in front of the Magic Kingdom and kind of down that way.
Yeah, it was in the front of the Magic Kingdom, and then the TTC walkway, and then part of, and then obviously between the Wedding Pavilion and Polynesian was eventually added on, because those are wedding bricks and other things over there. But yeah, anything, it didn't make it beyond that. I don't know if it ever was going to really go completely around the world.
That's the thing. It seemed like the bridge they made now, where the water pageant stored, that little canal. That's I mean, it didn't stop right there, but it went a ways down there, but it was always just like a dead end with some lights and then benches down there, like you could walk down there and sit.
If memory serves, they still had not ruled out the Venetian resort. If you remember the Eisner, they revisited that pad between the Ticket and Transportation Center and the Contemporary.
Oh, right.
Building,
twice.
At some time around the 90s when they were looking at when they were doing all this other work around the traversing the thing. So I think at some point in their plans it may make total sense to have a footbridge and other things to take you between these various resorts, because there's going to be a whole other resort between the Ticket and Transportation Center and the Contemporary that never got built. The only thing I'll mention, there was a bench at the end of the walkway, so you could go down all the way to the end, which was about halfway, I think, to the lagoon where the electrical water pageant pulls out. And so the pathway went about halfway, and there was a little bench at the end that you could walk down there if you wanted to have a private conversation or a quiet moment. And there was a little beach dug out there close to that side, which they used for photo ops on occasion. And I bring it up because in the 1994 Disney calendar, Walt Disney World calendar, they staged a shot there of Alice in Wonderland with the Mad Hatter and I think a little boy and a little girl, and they were having a tea party on that beach with the Grand Floridian off in the distance in the background. And I might have to include that in the show notes. But that just came up in our my monthly calendar tweets. I don't know if it was February or January, but I think it was February.
Well, around there too, that beach that's where there would have been bleachers in the 70s, 80s, like for the water ski show. Remember, you had that little ticket and you'd go out to the Magic Kingdom. It was like over there on that side of the docks.
So so there were two locations. One was over by the Magic Kingdom and in the beach there, where the walkway was on that side, and then the other one was next to the Ticketed Transportation Center, right? Sort of between the TTC and the Polynesian. Yep.
All right. Well, you see what you did to us, Jennifer. There, it got crazy real fast. So
doesn't take much.
Yeah. Good question. And if you have any photos of that area, at any time, that'd be interesting to see. I know it's a weird spot, but we get weirder submissions of interesting photos. And speaking of that, we got a couple different ones in here. That leads me into we get a lot of, not a lot, but they are fun to get. Jake Perillo. He wrote us with a picture, and he just said, we're trying to figure out where this was. My family and Brian and Hal came in, and they basically said, like, yeah, you're in the Chapeau, the hat store, and here's the year. And
there were it was him and his sisters, and they were all standing in new hats somewhere inside, and you could tell in the background that there were a few hats on the rack. So it was I said it was definitely a hat store. I thought it was the Chapeau in Town Square, and then Hal took a look at it and said, oh no, that's the one that was in Fantasyland.
So that's always cool. And if you have those photos, like you said, if it's an obscure one, you're not sure, totally send that to us. And we're pretty good at identifying things. I mean, I've seen the fellas here identify a tag on a shirt, and that tells them the year, and it's something else. So definitely send those our way.
We love that challenge.
Yeah. Stump the experts, if you want to call it that.
It beats real work every day when those emails come in.
This one is from, not that long ago, but it feels like it was forever ago. We just missed it on the last podcast, from Randy. He was listening way back when we did the Fort Wilderness episode, and believe it or not, he was a character performer from 1984 to 1989. He worked the breakfast at Pioneer Hall in Fort Wilderness.
Oh.
4 characters in a lead worked the breakfast, and there were 2 or 3 seating. He doesn't remember. Chip and Dale would perform with the male and female singer-dancers. The other 2 characters, Liver Lips and Wendell from Country Bear Jamboree, would visit tables before and after the main show. Now, I made the mistake. We talked about the character of Melvin the Moose. It looked like a big animatronic head they took off the wall of Country Bear Jamboree, put it in Pioneer Hall, and Melvin took part in the show. Randy enlightened me. He says the Melvin the Moose head on stage was not an animatronic. It was just a puppet head. So there was a person back there, and they would operate the head from behind the stage, controlling the mouth and the eyes. It would have been very difficult to sync an audio animatronic, as the show was freestyle instead of pre-recorded, and the singers and piano player provided all the content. An audio technician would cue Melvin's dialogue at the right time. He says it was a fun breakfast at work, especially when the host would bring baskets of chocolate chip muffins to the green room between the shows. So that's awesome, Randy. Thank you for clarifying that, because I don't know if that's like one of those stories that I feel like is lost to time, how Melvin the Moose worked at Fort Wilderness. So
plus there were muffins.
Muffins, yes.
Which we probably have the recipe for.
So the next one we got was from our friend Ed. Ed says he used to work in a position where he'd plan conferences at Disney. In 2017, he negotiated with the Swan and Dolphin to host a conference, and he would always get a Christmas gift from the Swan and Dolphin. In 2018, he opened a box from them. So this was just 2-3 years ago. And he got the actual plushes that we talked about as a gift, and we were kind of all blown away that they were still giving those out. And I don't. Maybe they had an old supply. Maybe they still sold them up until 18. But I was kind of blown away by that one. So
yeah, I stayed there in November, and I think Hal has stayed there recently too. They don't have, at least not in the Dolphin, any like hotel run gift shops anymore. They have the grab and go that's kind of a multi-function shop, and then there's a Disney gift shop and a few kind of froofy supply stores, but there's no like hotel gift shop there like traditionally. So my guess is that there was a supply of them that when they got rid of their hotel branded gift shop, they went into a closet somewhere, and the marketing folks said, "Hey, this is great. We'll send them out to these people."
Exactly. Well, thank you for that. That was super cool, and we'll share that picture for sure of your little setup there. Two more here, two quick ones. This one's from Eric. Eric says that his favorite resort, the same as Michael Eisner, is the Yacht Club, and he really gets a kick out of the unique aromas that each resort has. So he found a secret. If you would like to replicate the smell of the Yacht Club, all you have to do is go to your local drugstore, buy some Axe body spray in the flavor or scent of Epic Sky, and he thinks or says it smells exactly like the Yacht Club. So, a little fun task for you to do there.
Huh. I wonder how many ladies would like it if you smelled like the Yacht Club. That probably would drive them crazy.
Only
right?
women of discerning tastes.
That's right.
That's awesome. So, you might have just boosted Axe's. What happened? We just sold a bunch of Epic Sky. I don't know what happened. All right, so our last one was actually an Instagram message, and Angela wrote us in. Angela, we get messages all over the place, and we try to get to all of them. Sometimes it's just a thumbs up because it's super cool and that, but this got us going again. Angela wrote us a picture of herself in a store at Epcot, and she's standing next to an inflatable Figment. And we started looking, we're like, was this like a Baymax walk around? Was this something that is in the store just sitting there? Brian and Hao were in on this discussion with me. Do you guys want to talk about what you found?
This was another work stopper because the picture was of those inflatables that people put up mostly for the Christmas holidays. I mean, I know there are Halloween ones and other stuff now, but they're the ones that have like the little hairdryer type air compressor attached. And, the display inflates with a light inside of it to be a blow up Santa or whatever, and they've become
dimly
more
lighted.
Yeah, they've become more elaborate over the years, but
it's about what, 6 foot tall? Would you say?
Yeah, about. And this one it's a very good representation of Figment, and so I saw it and I said, guys, what is this? Like, does anybody remember this thing? Because it was clearly a one-off. It wasn't something they sold because we would have known more about it. And Hal remembered seeing it somewhere online in the last couple of years, a fuller representation. And then we found, we'll have to link to it, but another Disney site where a guy had a screen grab of video showing it inflating from the little suitcase. So this led me down to a rabbit hole of, well, when did those inflatables get invented? We tracked it down to a German company. In 1986, they invented the inflatable lawn ornament. And JT and I both had a memory that they really didn't take off here in sales until the 2000s, which is accurate. It was backed up by an article written on the history of the company. Although I remember them around here earlier than that on lawns, but they just hadn't become like a big thing. In fact, we used to make fun of the people who would decorate their houses for Christmas with those inflatables because it was like you were cheating. You took you 5 minutes to decorate your house for Christmas. You put 3 of those inflatables on the lawn.
And then during the day, it looks like a plane crash happening in your yard.
Yes, they so that's my impression of an ornament deflated.
Yeah, but Disney was crazy for inflatables in the 90s, especially. That's when we saw. I think the first large scale inflatable I ever saw was in Mickey's Starland. So when Birthday Land, I should say, when they opened up Birthday Land, there was a giant Mickey inflatable. They brought a lot of the inflatables on their road shows to promote the Magic Kingdom. And then at Epcot, oh my gosh, they went crazy during Surprise in the Skies, where there were giant inflatables of the characters in front of a bunch of the countries.
Yeah, so, and it makes perfect sense because you figure this company invents these things in 1986. Disney is always looking for the latest, newest thing, especially back then, to incorporate into their shows and into their parks and into their promotions. And so they did. They had the inflatables that House talking about Birthday Land. So 2 years after the company started, they have them Birthday Land. And then in that 89, 90, 90, the Surprise in the Skies, they have all kinds of an inflatable almost for every World Showcase country with a Disney character in an ethnic costume from that country. When the studios opened, when Disney MGM Studios opened, part of their nighttime fireworks show was a giant inflatable Sorcerer Mickey that would inflate on the roof of the Chinese theater. And then, of course, I think the capstone to it was the 25th anniversary birthday cake castle. So you're taking that up to 96, 97, and the beginning of 98 at the Magic Kingdom. About a third of the ornamentation on that birthday cake castle were inflatable things that were attached to it that stayed inflated. I don't know if they left them inflated overnights when the park was closed or not, when the lights are off. It would be really interesting to know if they deflated those things overnight and then just reinflated them in the morning before the sun came up. But that's kind of the last I remember. Like the last hurrah of the inflatables was the birthday cake castle.
Yeah, it's amazing. They had a huge legacy sit there. So
yeah.
I wonder then if that was a small scale test or something that they did at Figment, and they were like, yeah, we'll have a place where we can put that.
Yeah, well, the video, and it's probably from Walt Disney World Inside Out or one of those Disney Channel type shows where they did behind the scenes Imagineering. But it's this, like I said, we'll link to it. But it's a little, silver like metal
attaché case.
Yeah, attaché case,
like
metal travel suitcase type thing. That someone would carry photographic equipment or something, and then you pop the top off, plug it in, and Figment inflates and sits on the so the suitcase housing hides the air compressor that inflates it. But I mean, I was looking at it saying, boy, this would be great. Like, I wonder where this thing is, and it's in some Imagineer's basement now. Like that's where it is. Like, I'm sure it disappeared when they pulled it off stage, but.
Oh, it's awesome. It's like, I love the briefcase. It's like you could walk around with that and it either looks like plutonium from your corner drugstore or, one of those things from like the Sharper Image catalog.
I really hope, I know some of the folks from D23 that do events listen to it, like find it in the archives if it's there, because that is something you should absolutely bring to one of your next Destination D events.
Yeah, it's very well colored. It's, got the wings, the long tail. I mean, it's neat. Hands are up, like for some reason, like stay back, this whole thing. But very cool to see an actual real life photo of it. And what store was that in, her photo? How?
Oh, it was in the Centurium.
Okay, so if you're in the Centurium in this era, you might have very well got a photo next to it and not known it was such a big deal. But it was like it was sitting there. I would guess next to some other Journey into Imagination merchandise. Or something.
I believe it in the other photo that I saw, which I was not able to find again. It was a display in the middle of a bunch of Figment plush, so it was like a little Figment section within the store.
And if I remember the video correctly, its tail wagged up and down as a result of the air compressor. So it was like movement and everything going on there. It was neat.
Yeah, definitely cool. Thank you, Angela. We appreciate that share on the Instagram messages.
JT, before we wrap up here, we also had Kevin Wizzardo wrote in, and if you remember last month, we were talking about the FAA and all the height of the tower, whether it needs a red light on the top of the Dolphin. He did a little further digging. He started to read a advisory circle, has 109 pages, and he basically said he found out that, yes, structures over 200 feet do need to be marked or lighted, but an FAA study can override that. So he started to search the archives and didn't find anything of significance on Disney property. But from what he can tell, and what I think we agree, is that there was a study done for these for a variety of reasons, and they certainly were not deemed as necessary. And maybe to Howe's point last month with the lighting, just lighting up the building so much, or those laser beam eyes inside the Swan, right? I forgot about those. So. And Brian, I think you had something else before we close out the mailbag, correct?
Well, we get a lot of emails every month from people who are listening to our back catalog of episodes, and our friend BJ Major, who's been a great resource for us, especially from Lake Buena Vista Shopping Village, where she worked in 1976, 77, I think, has been listening to a bunch of the episodes and sending us emails. So we want to thank her and everybody else who's written to us. And as we appreciate it every month, because a lot of times they're bringing up stuff we haven't thought about in 3 or 4 or 5 years since we recorded the episode. So it's always fun for us to kind of go back and revisit that stuff.
If you'd like to reach out to us, podcast@retrowdw.com is the email. You can shoot us direct messages on social medias, comment on a webpage story, anything you want to do to get out to us, and hopefully your question, comment, or piece of info will end up on a future episode.
All right, before we get to this month's main topic, we do have a prize to give away, and that is Boundless Realms.
A new car?
Cavalier.
That's right, a Cavalier. Wouldn't it be great if for our next event, we'll just have tickets give out on a machine as you go in and be a random winner?
Not a winner to
that can be arranged.
Mm-hmm. I think we might be able to do that. So yes, we were last month. We talked about Fox and Nolte's book Boundless Realms, which is about the behind the scenes as well as a in-depth research and discussion on the Haunted Mansion and all things that created it. It's a great, fantastic read. She gave us a copy for us to give away, and we held a little contest. Everybody who wrote in and gave us the code word spooky or AOL keyword. Should we call that the LBVHS or Retro WDW keyword? Spooky.
Yes.
Put that code in, and we put it in the random wheel generator, and we have a winner. So congratulations to Isabelle Carlton. She has won a copy of Boundless Realms, and that's in the possession of Hal Bauer, so he will get that out to you as soon as possible, and we'll write to you and get your address and get that out. So congratulations, and continue listening to the show for other random giveaways that we'll be doing across the year. So, all right, well, it is time to get into this month's main topic, and as we talked at the top of the show, the topic of this month is Pleasure Island, and I know they were going, oh, let's talk about Adventures Club and test tube shots and walking around, and we're going to get there. We promise. But as always on this show, we take our time and we turn the clocks.
Wasn't quite as pleasurable at the outset. That's
right.
You got to go through the unpleasurable island part first.
And honestly, if you consider shots out of test tubes pleasurable, we need to chat. But anyway, everybody has the different time of their lives to enjoy those. But as we always do on the show, we love turning the clocks way, way, way back. And that's what Hal is going to do for us tonight. We'll go way back into what actually led Walt Disney World to even entertain the idea of bringing a nighttime entertainment, dancing, and libation type facility to Walt Disney World. So there's a lot of back history in that, and then we will do a part 2 episode where we follow up beyond that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I believe Mr. Merriweather is waiting for us, Mr. Merriweather Pleasure. So I don't want to delay him anymore. So Mr. Hal Bowers, let's turn those clocks back and start off on Pleasure Island.
Sure. So the story of Pleasure Island, oddly enough, Todd, as you're saying, it could really begin in any number of places. So like many of our topics, it's really not just one story, but several intertwined. So for this episode, I'll roll that clock back to 1967 in Pensacola, Florida, where an ex-Navy pilot named Bob Snow lived. Now, Bob Snow was also a Dixieland jazz trumpeter. He played around the Pensacola area with his band called the South Hangar Six. And he did something very interesting for Florida. He took his last military paycheck, along with money that he scraped together by selling his Porsche Roadster and some of his possessions, and he rented a dilapidated warehouse in a rundown area of town and opened up a bar where his band could play permanently. This would be the first Rosie O'Grady's Good Time Emporium. And within a short amount of time, the venue proved so popular that Snow was able to purchase the warehouse building outright and build additional bars and restaurants. So, jazz, good time, Pensacola, how does that get us to Florida? Well, how does this get us to Orlando? So he was actually a pilot, and he still flew. So after being diverted to Orlando, on his way back from a business trip and skywriting lessons, so the skywriters in Orlando actually started as part of Rosie O'Grady's, Snow met up with a pilot buddy and a fellow Dixieland jazz aficionado, and this gentleman suggested that he open up a new Rosie O'Grady's in Central Florida. So on the way back to the airport after meeting up with his friend, Snow took a detour into downtown Orlando, and he discovered the long-neglected Church Street Railroad Station corridor. So back in Orlando history, as it was in many cities, there was bustling activity around, the railroad downtown and the big stop there. And then over time, that area became abandoned and just, sort of rotted away. So he thought that would be a good place to replicate his success in Pensacola. So he took, even though Rosio's was doing fine. He actually ended up taking a mail delivery job that would allow him to travel from Pensacola to Orlando each day. He worked his business meetings in the morning, and eventually he struck a deal to rent the former Orlando Hotel and Slemons department store buildings for $250 a month. And on July 24th, 1974, the Orlando Rosie O'Grady's Good Time Emporium opened.
And how is this? Is this related to the Rosie O'Grady's in New York City by any chance?
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Okay,
I don't believe so.
Okay. Great place for a shrimp cocktail, by the way. Just so you know.
Okay, so I don't know if that was something that grew out of this separate, or just the name was popular. So, but I do not believe they were related.
I thoroughly enjoy a good shrimp cocktail, so now I'm making a note of that.
Big shrimp. Awesome place.
So in the Panhandle, Rosie's grew into something called Seville Row, which is a complex of bars. And it didn't take very long for that success to be repeated in Orlando. In 1976, he added the restaurant Apple Annie's Courtyard, a gourmet cocktail bar, Lily Marlene's Aviator Pub in 1977, a top 40 dance club, Phineas Fogg's Balloon Works in 1978, and then in 1982, an incredibly ambitious 3-story country western bar called the Cheyenne Saloon and Opera House. Now, at the Cheyenne Saloon, there was a 30-minute country music showcase that was taped at the bar. Every week, beginning on March 10th, 1984, it ran for 8 years on the Nashville network, and it brought all kinds of big stars to Orlando, including George Jones, Tammy Wynette, Porter Wagner, Tanya Tucker, Charlie Pride, Roger Miller, and then newcomers like Travis Tritt, Alan Jackson, and Garth Brooks. Publicized the Church Street complex to a national television audience and brought a lot of attention to Orlando and the concept of nightlife there. So Church Street really became incredibly popular during that time period. And there were a few key factors to its success. A single ticket admission to all the highly themed bars and restaurants, an infectious, fun atmosphere that encouraged patrons to feel like they were part of the show, live music everywhere, characters such as Red Hot Mama and Uncle Sam who would mingle with guests when not performing, and the concept of taking abandoned buildings which had served a variety of purposes, then being lavishly restored and enhanced and used again for these bars and restaurants. So by 1985, Church Street Station was Florida's 4th largest attraction behind Walt Disney World, SeaWorld, and Busch Gardens, with 1.7 million visitors a year. So it really was a tourism powerhouse at that time. So how does this relate to Disney? Well, meanwhile, a few miles up the road, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells were noticing a gap in the offerings at Walt Disney World, which they had just taken control of in September of 1984 as CEO and president, respectively, of Walt Disney Productions. And they realized when the parks closed, there just wasn't a lot to do. Eisner and Wells were planning a massive energization of all of Disney's business units, prepping for large investments in their film and television divisions and also in their theme parks. So hoping to achieve something similar with their massive land holdings in Florida, they formed the Disney Development Company, called the DDC for short, to spearhead the planning of new resorts, residential, and retail centers in Florida and beyond. WED, soon to become Walt Disney Engineering, would continue to handle the development of the parks, but everything outside of the gates would fall to the Disney Development Company, and the Grand Floridian was the first hotel that was a large project for DDC. Eisner asked DDC to come with ideas to transform the Disney shopping village at Lake Buena Vista into a higher energy location with more nightclubs, upscale bars and restaurants, and high-end retail. The task seemed very well suited to them, as a lot of people in the organization had come from the background of doing exactly that. They dutifully drew together a list of top national chain tenants who might participate, but Eisner was reportedly not really compelled by their presentation. Marty Sklar, who was at the meeting, suggested that Eisner allow Imagineering to take a crack at the project, and Eisner agreed. Sklar assigned Imagineers Rick Rothschild and Chris Carradine to lead a small team dedicated to the project, which at that time was still nameless. What they would come up with was familiar in some ways to Orlando residents, but innovative, risky, and boundary-pushing for a company with a squeaky clean image to uphold, and while being known for innovative, internally seemed very resistant to change. So we'll take a deep dive into the development of Pleasure Island and the clubs in a later episode, but for this episode, we're going to keep it at a very high level. Chris Carradine was an architect. He would be in charge of the design of the island, and Rick Rothschild was in charge of determining the types of clubs and the entertainment that the island would offer.
And that was not the first plan for down there in that area, was it, Hal?
No, it was not. In fact, it's funny, Brian, because they said they kind of eyed this property that was north of the existing shopping center, and they thought, instead of just redoing the shopping center that was there, what if we added on? There seems to be this land that's unoccupied, but what was supposed to be there before, Brian?
Well, so the shopping village, remember, opened 1975, and then the Empress Lily opened in 1977. And that's where the area stopped. Originally, Dick Nunes, when he was president of the resort and Disney Parks and Attractions, his idea was that beyond the Empress Lily, that riverboat would be the beginning of a New Orleans themed area, a Bayou New Orleans themed area, that would be shopping and dining and nightclubs and, borrowing a bit from Bourbon Street and a bit from, the New Orleans architecture altogether, that French and Creole inspired architecture and the low slung buildings. And that ultimately didn't happen for a couple of reasons. I mean, 1977 is a good time frame for opening the Empress Lily. The economy got really bad. It was never great in the mid 70s, but by the late 70s, by the end of the Carter years, stagflation was a thing that it was really, really bad. And the first couple of years of the Reagan administration, so you're going from like 77, 78 into like 1983. And that's the end of the Ron Miller era, when Michael Eisner comes in 1984, when the economy starts to improve. So really there was no money to sit there and develop that area. So the plans kind of fell by the wayside. They were drawn out though. I mean, they did have sketches for what they wanted to do, and pieces of that survived up the river there. When they developed beyond the old Key West resort, they developed Dixie Landings and Port Orleans. And that was all kind of based off of what originally was the Nunes plan for the expansion of the shopping village to the New Orleans area.
Yeah, it looks like but from the plans, it looked like it actually would have been really nice.
I mean, how many times have we looked, whether it's there or what's the western one they were going to put by River Country?
Buffalo Junction.
Buffalo Junction. I always want to say Petticoat Junction. It's Buffalo Junction. I mean, every time we look at those things, we're like, oh man, we wish they built those.
Yeah, crazy. So it was such a good place to build something. These guys kind of accidentally discovered it too, because I guess they must not have known that something was planned to be there before. So the architect Carradine, he took inspiration from Vancouver, British Columbia's Granville Island, which was a waterfront industrial development once occupied by warehouses, mills, factories, and shops that serviced local logging, mining, and shopping industries. But in 1979 was redeveloped into a large public market. That island grew quickly into an arts and entertainment district with theaters and unique shops and restaurants, drawing locals and tourists, and winning architecture awards for the innovative reuse of existing architecture, grafting extensions onto buildings and adding glass windows when necessary, or simply just painting the tin walls, bright colors to add energy to the location. So Chris Carradine really liked this concept and thought, hey, let's do that in Florida. That'd be a great thing to pattern this after. But then the question is, how do you reclaim an industrial area when there's no industrial area to reclaim? So the answer to that in part came from the world of improvisation, which takes us back to Epcot Center in 1982, when Disney had a slightly different problem. It had built a dazzling world showcase, but without a lot of attractions. So they were leaning heavily on folk entertainers from each of the pavilion's countries to keep guests engaged. Entertainment scouts from Disney actually attended the Bay Area Renaissance Festival, which has the unfortunate acronym of BARF, over by me in Largo, Florida, and they noticed how the crowds responded to the performers from Minnesota's SAC Theater, SAK, and they hired them for a 3-month contract to perform in Epcot's UK pavilion. So if you ever saw, the Renaissance Fair style show in the UK pavilion, that was them. They were such a hit in the UK that SAC was quickly asked to develop a show for the Italy pavilion. If you remember that, Todd, I'm sure you saw this many times, the Theater de Bologna.
Oh, yeah, many a times. I think my grandparents always stopped for it.
Sure. Oh, my God.
It was the thing to see.
It was so... Their shows were so popular. I mean, they drew... And they knew how to draw a crowd, too. I mean, they would literally ring bells and basically tell people to fill in around it. And, like, people were crazy for that. WDI ended up being so impressed by the way that SAC actors engaged with the park guests. They asked SAC artistic director Craig McNair Wilson to come in as a consultant on some of the projects that Disney was developing at that time to see if there were opportunities to bring that same kind of actor-guest relationship and interactions into the new entertainment district that they were planning, and as well as parks like the Disney Studio Park that they were kind of planning in Florida and Typhoon Lagoon. And we should kind of emphasize these three areas were all being developed simultaneously within Disney. So you had Typhoon Lagoon, Disney MGM Studios, and Pleasure Island all under development at the same time. So the resources within WDI were getting stretched kind of thin.
It was the Disney decade, Hal.
It was. What they ended up getting from him was the raison d'être for their fictional reclaimed industrial district. Wilson riffed with Imagineers Rothschild, Carradine, and Joe Rohde, and they developed a rambling history of the rise and fall of Meriwether Adam Pleasure, from his discovery of the peninsula while plying Florida's inland waterways, to the foundation of his shipbuilding and shipping empire, to the accidental explosion that made Pleasure Island into an island, to Pleasure's disappearance in the Antarctic, his business passing to his sons, who mismanaged the empire into bankruptcy, and then a hurricane that struck the island and led to its abandonment, and then it being rediscovered by Disney in 1987, who could then reclaim and redevelop it. So this was perhaps the first time that story, not theme, not location, became the predominant driver of a design of a Disney project. So every building, every converted store, every plaza, every staircase had a story reason for existing. I mean, this really was kind of a different take for Disney that we see a lot more today.
You know, how I'm thinking about how you just mentioned there was the first one that has the whole story that's told. I think the problem with some of the projects prior, especially like Big Thunder Mountain, it had a backstory, but it was never told. You had to piece it together, and it didn't unfold as blatantly as they did with Pleasure Island, or at least they intended to do. You know, Thunder Mountain, this whole thing about the haunted and the mountain and the, you know, Indians chasing or whatever it was. You never got that. As far as you know, you were going on a wild ride and over a butte. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's all it is. So this one's really, it was out there and totally different.
Oh, very, very out there. So they basically, as they're developing this, they went back and forth, and let me find his name again. So Craig McNair Wilson started writing all this stuff down as they got into this, and it really became this huge, long, rambling document. And then finally Marty Sklar was like, look, hey, take this, rewrite this into a condensed form, you know, make it fun, make it pithy. And he eventually turned this into, I think it was a 9-page, like, typed document called The Final Ultimate Semi-Official History of Pleasure Island. They
paid people to do this.
Right. But still, and if you think about it, so at the same, Typhoon Lagoon also has, you know, a very rich, detailed backstory that was developed at this time, which we won't even get into here, but like it has a very deep story. And for whatever reason, you know, I think Imagineering really fell in love with improv and, you know, being able to develop these ideas and these stories, you know, where before, you know, I think you always had a Walt to go make me one of these. When they didn't have a Walt anymore to kind of drive the development of, you know, something, like he would literally say, hey, I want a Matterhorn, and they would go make a Matterhorn. I think this kind of helped them come up with the ideas for things. They would, I think now a lot of the decisions were business related. It was like, hey, we need a nighttime shopping district, or hey, we need a new flume ride, over here. And then it was like, okay, well, what do we do? So having someone that could, help them be creative, and collaborative, I think was really important for them. So to make this, huge story accessible to guests, excerpts from the documents were turned into 26 plaques placed around the island, often tucked in kind of obscure locations for the curious to discover. So it's interesting, Todd, they did publicize the story a little bit in like Disney Magazine and in the Birnbaum guides, and they had these, plaques everywhere, but it wasn't really shoved down your throat yet.
Right.
It was kind of still up for you to discover that. And, me, when I first went to Pleasure Island, you see this little plaque and you read and you're like, and I guess I'm the type of guy that when you go to any kind of historical place, it's like you read the plaques. But they were really good at the bottom of each plaque to let there are more of them out there.
It's like they had Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom, the first version, 1.0, right?
Yeah, very, very much so. I'm picking up this one from I took photos of a lot of these as I first visited there and before they closed.
Amazing.
So yeah, shocker, right?
You might be the only guy.
No, actually there's at least 2 or 3 of us.
Now, are all the plaques gone? Are there any sitting around at Disney Springs anywhere that you know of?
I think now that it's been redeveloped, I don't think there are any of them left. When it was in that quasi-abandoned state, they were still there. And you could still find some of them, especially the ones that were tucked in the more obscure areas, because they just, nobody knew, nobody cared. So they were still there. But they would say something like, I picked up the one from the Portobello Rose Garden, and at the bottom it says, the flowery history of Pleasure Island, and it's illusionary inhabitants are misrepresented on the ungenuine history plaques located at each island entrance. So it kind of pushed you in a way to go find the other ones. So it was very neat, because at the same time, when you read that, it's like, oh, we're telling you that this stuff is historical. We're also telling you that it's complete BS. So they're letting themselves off the hook. At the same time, they're building this rich story, which is very meta, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think too that the other end of it is, I think, and I get that Typhoon Lagoon had it at the same era, and that's not a coincidence, but I also don't think Disney was just going to make a bar district without something creative attached to it. They weren't just going to go, yeah, let's open up 4 bars and it's on an island, it's a ticketed event. I mean, they always seem like they always have to raise the bar or go a little bit above and beyond. So
Right. And I think this is, I don't know if it's worthy of discussion in this forum. I think all of this story is great. And this is a very personal opinion. So, everybody feel free, jump in on your opinions, listeners, send in your opinions too. I have a mind, remember when, what are the corporate statements that everybody likes to make? The, sort of the corporate vision statements. What are those called?
Mission statement.
So corporations got into this big thing of doing mission statements, and they would take their mission statements and then they would very often put them up in a customer facing area. And I think mission statements are great on a corporate level to kind of give you, internally an idea of what you're all striving for. But if you're doing that, if you're actually striving to fulfill your mission, you don't need to tell your customer what the mission is, because they're going to be fulfilled by you, doing that mission. In the same way, I wonder, I think doing this exercise of coming up with the reasons for all of these things, is important to be able to figure out, okay, how do we fit this into the story? Why do we need this kind of building? Why does this building look like this? It could be a great, design document, but I don't know if you need to tell people about it. And in the end, if Pleasure Island is successful or not successful, it's not going to be because of the story. It's going to be because people went to the clubs and they drank like fishes and enjoyed themselves and came back again. I would say there were probably, a very small percentage of people like myself that were attracted by this, but 95%, couldn't care less about the story. And it was just, did I have a good time or did I not have a good time?
You want to know why I went for the first time?
For the plaques.
Sure.
I couldn't wait. I'm always one on the family vacation.
He's going to tick them off a checklist.
I always stop the car and look at those plaques on the side of the road. But no, it's so in college, before I had gone to Pleasure Island for the first time, my roommate, sophomore, junior year, I forget, he had this plush frog that he bought into the room. And I said, Steve, where'd you get that? He goes, oh, this frog, his name is Lenny. I said, what do you mean it's Lenny? And he gave it this name. He's like, see the bee on his mouth? That's the bee, the magic Lenny and the magic bee. And I'm like, okay, I don't know where this is going, right?
I need a new roommate. That's where that's going.
No, he was the best roommate. He was
all right,
great.
good.
We still keep in touch. So he says, Lenny and the magic bee. And so he proceeds to tell me the story. And he and his brothers and some friends were down at Pleasure Island playing the Whack-a-Frog game where, where you pay the money and you whack the frog and it goes into. Well, they won. And they carried around Lenny through Pleasure Island that night. And apparently on the flight home, the letter B fell off of the seat next to them. So they stuck it on his mouth. And to that day, it was always Lenny and the Magic Bee. So I actually, let me get out here. I have a picture of Lenny and the Magic Bee too in our dorm room. So anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is that how it goes back to somebody telling me about it, and that's why we wanted to go there. Not, we said yes, we'll play the leapfrog game, but it was a word of mouth thing. It wasn't like, oh, I want to go discover this story, because that didn't carry over. As far as we're concerned, we were going to have fun. So,
right, absolutely. Well, Todd, I think you have the Burn Bombs guide from the preview one, right? From
Correct.
Before it opened.
Yep.
Would you do me the honor of reading what Burn Bomb had to say about the island to sort of set the stage for our second half here?
Absolutely. Hold on, you gotta get you Lenny.
I'll say while he's digging that up, I wasn't of age, but it was always intriguing to me. Like, it was somewhere at Disney I couldn't go. I wasn't allowed to go, but you'd see it. You could see, the big buildings from over there. You're like, what is going on there? That's in, at that age, 10, 12 years old, you had no idea what was going on there really, drinking and that, but it was like, I really want to go check that out. But, we never really went over there because it was like, that's where people go at night to, go have parties and stuff like that. That was it. And I didn't know the theming, but I saw Jessica Rabbit and I saw the signs. It looked like a lot of fun. It looked cool.
Oh, and the spotlights. Do you remember the spotlights that would light up the sky there?
Yeah, and it was always on the Disney TV. It's New Year's every night, and as a kid, New Year's is a lot of fun. We have
I can do that every night. I'm there.
It just sounded really cool. Like, I was like, wow, as a kid, that was great. As a preteen.
Yeah. And what is amazing is, like, it did not open with that.
Right.
that did not exist.
We need to keep people here
for the first months that Pleasure Island was open.
I think part of ahead of Todd reading what is essentially a PR release, I think that it's part of that critical era where they were a golden organization, where it seemed like everything they were touching was turning to gold. And the press for Eisner and Wells and for the company was not only are they doing all of these things, but whenever they do them better than anybody else, with more attention to detail than anybody else, more spectacularly than anybody else, and they perfect it where others have tried. So when you're looking to get those articles written about, Disney's opening up this nightclub compared to whatever Universal's doing, because they were open by that point, and compared to Church Street Station, where people were going off property, or boardwalk and baseball later and things like that. Anytime Disney wanted those, I feel like Imagineering and the leadership leaned into that when they started getting into these. We'll write a 9-page document about the history of these buildings that literally no one has any history with. And no one cares, but we're going to do it anyway to show our attention to detail, so that when the national press is writing all their articles on us opening up this nightclub area, there's 3 paragraphs on the lengths that Disney went to make it exceptional beyond compare. And that's really why I think they did those things. Not because anybody cares when they walk into New Fantasyland that the glass in the windows was imported from Germany. This is a true story, by the way. Like, that's a thing they actually did. They went and got these like special glass made for the windows on Belle's Castle. Nobody cares. I mean, nobody's walking, but they want to be able, when they give that interview, to tell you that, hey, look what we've done.
So what did they do? Or this is what they were going to do, right, Hal?
Yes.
All right. So settle in here. We'll read the few paragraphs here. Beside the Empress Lily at the Disney Village Marketplace, a new island has been formed in the Buena Vista Lagoon. Here, visitors will find the remnants of a 19th century shipbuilding empire, including the once lavish residence of its former owner, Pittsburgh entrepreneur Meriwether Adam Pleasure. Natives of these parts say the place went to ruin during the 1950s when Disney Imagineers came to its rescue, restoring the 6-acre waterfront as an attraction devoted to nighttime diversions. Visitors can enjoy a variety of nightlife activities: dancing, hot jazz, cool comedy. The multi-million-dollar complex caters to adults and older children with 6 themed nightclubs, imaginative shops, and food outlets, all set in a lively atmosphere of street performances, fireworks displays, and water shows. Old Meriwether Adam would have hardly recognized his former haunts. There's the Adventurers Club, an eerie place of gypsies and ghosts, where a certain Miss Zenobia tells the tales and fortunes to those at the Illusions Bar. Masks and shrunken heads festoon the walls, and organ plays by itself in the library salon. If the Adventurers atmosphere sounds too tame, visitors can head to the Zephyr Rock and Roller Dome, a lounge and dance floor circled by a roller skating rink. At Mannequins, the dance floor revolves. What remains still are platforms on which the mannequin fashion figures are set. If dancing like Dervish is not your thing, live entertainment options include the Comedy Warehouse and Neon Armadillo. For kids, there's a non-alcoholic diversion, Videopolis Dance Club, a high-tech video nightclub featuring rock videos and resounding stereo. Guests who have been to Disneyland will recognize this spot. Eating is a mainly splendid affair on Pleasure Island. The Fireworks Factory serves authentic American barbecue, family style. The Zephyr Grill serves custom burgers. Foods from around the world are featured at Meriwether's Food Fair. Sweet Surrender takes care of folks in need of a banana split fix. And at Mr. Pleasure's former residence, the Portobello Yacht Club, now restored to its grandeur, the whole family can enjoy offerings of northern Italian dishes and fresh seafood. Pleasure Island's restaurants and shops are open during operative Disney Market Village Place hours. Nightclubs open early in the evening and don't close until early morning. And it's slated that it's opening during the summer of 1989.
Yeah. So what year was that one from?
This is the 1989 Birnbaum. So this was probably written in 88 at some point.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's amazing there is like some of that stuff did not happen.
No.
Like there it is that close to opening, and like some of the things that you mentioned just didn't end up making it. So let's take a quick tour of the opening day clubs, shops, and restaurants, and then I'll give you a brief glimpse of the stories behind them.
Anybody who's not 21 or older has to turn the podcast off now, right?
Yeah. So actually,
it depends on what time they're listening to this. If it's in the morning, it's okay. But if it's after 7 p.m., they do have to leave the room.
It's a hard ticket.
So
event.
Actually, Brian, you let me segue into something then. So when the island first opened, it was intended to be something that was accessible to families. There were a few of the clubs that were strictly 21 and over, mainly Mannequins, but really the rest of the clubs on the island were intended to be. They were accessible for families with kids too. That really isn't what the public wanted, which is why it ended up changing relatively quickly. But kids were able to be there on opening day.
I can tell you, mom and dad's date night out on the one night on vacation, they get to go away with grandma and grandpa are watching kids. They don't want to bring the kids with them to Pleasure.
No.
And no kid wants to go to a comedy bar or adventurers club.
That is really that part of that line, that Disney had a trot here of, what does it mean to be having a nightclub? It's a very, again, we know the Magic Kingdom and, it's a very family oriented trip. So where is that line of what you can say and what you cannot say?
Well,
and
it's kind of new territory for them, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's the first time they're designing something without necessarily intending some of it for families.
Well, what was the closest thing prior? I mean, to this, Saltwater Express playing some music in a lounge. I mean, there really is nothing else, right?
I mean, look at World Showcase too, and that was like the first alcohol really in a Disney theme park.
Yeah, but see, Beer Garden, all those shows, they were still open to. They were still family
and they closed
oriented.
at 9. It was done.
Right.
Like
you had Top of the World. I mean, but kids would still get up and dance.
I mean, Joy to the World wasn't controversial. That was played on a loop up there. So,
and I forget when we talked about Top of the World in our restaurant episode. I feel like there was an age restriction in the Top of the World show, maybe like a later one or something, but I could be wrong about it. I know the New Year's Eve stuff there always was
actually I know for one of our listeners wrote a little. I don't know if they were writing us or they're just talking about it on Twitter, but she was a young lady. And she remembers attending, I can't remember who the person was, but she remembers seeing like a singer and a comedian. Oh, actually on New Year's Eve, I think, at the Top of the World. And she would have been young at that point. So, yeah, I don't think, I think if you went to go see Sherry Lewis, that was fine. If for Kreskin, you could be a kid and that was okay.
There you go.
As long as you paid your $7 or whatever. All right, so let's get into a little bit of Pleasure Island, and I'll start with kind of the Cliff Note story version of the island story, which was on a plaque at its entrance, and it said Pleasure Island, founded in 1911, an unverifiable, anecdotal, purely subjective, theoretical, alleged purported history. Also, ersatz. Did I say that right? Is that the way you pronounce that?
Ersatz?
Ersatz. Yes, thank you. Also ersatz. A living monument to the wise fool, the mad visionary, the scoundrel, the scallywag, and seeker of enjoyment, Meriwether Adam Pleasure, who purchased the island in 1911. Pleasure's profitable canvas manufacturing sail fabricating empire, founded on this site, provided him with the capital to indulge his lifelong interest in the exotic, the experimental, and the unexplainable. Known as the Grand Fundmeister, Pleasure disappeared during his 1941 circumnavigation of the Antarctic. His sons, Henry and Stuart, took over the island in Pleasure Enterprises. Their mismanagement led to bankruptcy in 1955. Hurricane Connie hit that same year, and Pleasure Island was abandoned. In 1987, archaeologists uncovered the site and its remains, and a large-scale reclamation project was begun. In 1989, the new Pleasure Island was reopened and dedicated to the legacy of Meriwether Adam Pleasure. Fun for all, and all for fun. So, Can you imagine?
It's a lot to read. Now, is that before you go in or right after? I mean,
that's before you've had a drink. Fortunately,
hold up. I got to read this.
Let's just be glad his name was Pleasure. If it was like Gloom or something, this would be terrible.
Totally
right?
different.
Totally different island. Totally different.
So can you? And of course, one of the funny things about Pleasure Island is that was actually in Pinocchio.
Yeah,
I was going to mention that earlier. Yeah, it was Pleasure Island. Was the little boy, the
cigar smoking guys were.
Yeah. They would send the boys there and then turn them into donkeys later on. So that was always a fun thing of like, why would they name it that? But I don't know. Maybe we'll get to talk to someone that will explain that to us, because that always seemed like a.
And I also like the word pleasure. It just connotates some odd things too.
I was fine with the name.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't feel that it rings as family friendly or this place I don't know. It's just me.
Well, this is what I will say, Todd.
There's a plaque for that, Todd.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read it.
It's why.
Because we haven't had a chance to, talk to the folks and confirm these stories. I'm going to go back to Rosie O'Grady's. Rosie O'Grady's wasn't just Rosie O'Grady's. It was Rosie O'Grady's Good Time Emporium. So when you saw the name, it was somewhat, even though you didn't know who wrote, you saw the good time part of it, and it was very evocative, like, you're going to have fun when you come here. And so I think they were looking for something in the name that did the same thing. I don't know what this place is, but it looks like I'm supposed to have fun here because I see the word pleasure right there in the name.
We're going to make it really clear to you.
Right. Exactly. It is. And to an extent, you have to telegraph this is another like side trip. So like, this is another thing where I think Disney has kind of shot itself in the foot over the course of time, and particularly in this, in this location. We talk about the weenie and all these things that Disney got very good at learning to draw you into things. One of the problems that still happens, I think, within, the remnants of Pleasure Island today in downtown Disney, because they are going for this idea of a reclaimed area that has changed over time, unless you telegraph very good, like what is on the inside of the building, like there are some people that, yes, they read all the guidebooks and they know exactly what something is. They read the burn bombs before they come in, but there are an awful lot of people that just show up someplace and walk around. And if your building doesn't look like the thing that's inside of it, it's not very attractive and it's very confusing, and you're not going to get a lot of business, and that's one of the problems that Pleasure Island, I think, in some ways had, and why they tried to solve it with the name. Like if you walk by, today at downtown Disney, or what do they call it?
Disney Springs.
Today at Disney Springs. So you go to Disney Springs, there is like a restaurant, an Italian restaurant that is built into something that looks like
Enzo's Hideaway.
Airport, an airport terminal, and you don't know, like, that looks like an airport terminal. Right. It doesn't scream, I'm an Italian restaurant.
That whole little area is confusing, I think, still, even with the names. Like, there's the Enzo's and Enzo's Hideaway and that. So I think that if it looks like an abandoned building, like a Pleasure Island was supposed to look like, kind of like the normal human instinct isn't to walk into that abandoned building. Like, you're just not, hey, that looks like a place to party. It's just like, I don't know what's in there. What's that one that has the neon lights on it? I'm going to go to that one.
Exactly. So, this was a problem that we saw in the past with the Timekeeper at the Magic Kingdom. It's like, you saw this thing that said Metropolis Science Center, and there was a sign kind of stuffed in the back that said Timekeeper, but like, you don't know.
You thought it was
just
a
walking
store
by,
or something.
And that's why they end up
there. That's where you're
right,
going.
and that's why they end exactly. So you see, like the rocket jets. It's like there are rocket jets there.
Well, I don't want to go to a science center. I want to do a ride.
Right, and they end up having to put like a placard outside
and a cast member.
That's right.
Cast member waving people in.
Right, it tries to explain what it is. So, this is a real factor that you have to overcome, as a designer of entertainment spaces, is like, how do you let people know, what's on the inside of the building while they're looking at the outside?
It was like,
I think that's.
Go ahead, Todd.
I was gonna say, I think that's an interesting challenge alone as you're talking about it, Hal. But when you're trying to convey the story that these buildings were doing something else and then have been converted into what you're here for,
right?
That makes it even harder, because you then have to take a factory facade and say that something is cool and going on inside here. Now, I will say we've referenced this place before. One place in particular that did that really, really well was down in Baltimore when the power, what was it called? The power plant.
The power
plant or whatever.
Six
Flags. When that opened, the building was cool, but the way the sign was, it lured you in, right? You knew that something different was going on there. It wasn't just a standard brick building. So I'm just trying, now in this sense, they built the buildings to look like something and then had to adapt them. So they had the complete control to bring it in, but it's not easy.
It is very difficult. And again, a lot of the time we're talking about them walking a fine line. And so, I think we can judge, perhaps looking back, whether some places were more successful than others. And in fact, we did see things like the Adventurers Club, when it opened, had a very normal facade with a very tiny sign that said the Adventurers Club. And within a very short amount of time, suddenly there was like a piece of an airplane part and, skulls on flaming spears and pieces of a mummy and things placed outside of the Adventurers Club, which telegraphed more of what was on the inside. So there was an effort to do some redevelopment and some reimagining very quickly, because it wasn't really doing the job it was supposed to.
They had the theme too of like, I always look at things now, it's like almost, I feel like every Disneyland that's made from this era on is it's intentionally distressed so they can do less maintenance. The more distressed it gets, worn down, the better it looks. And that's kind of how this place plays in my brain, is like, it was once this, well, now we're going to convert it from an abandoned factory. Well, yeah, why is that so gross and dirty? Well, it's an abandoned factory. That's very simple. But I mean, you go through Star Wars land everywhere. It all looks old.
Well, I was going to say, look at everything that they've done, including Storybook Circus has fake rust. Look at Batu, same thing. That has been the theme here for a while now.
The entire animal kingdom.
Easy
kingdom
maintenance. It's
right. It's rusting.
Cracked cement is fine.
So I think that if you really look at Epcot and Magic Kingdom as just these pink pathway places, right? There's very few spots that draw you into that transportation to a different land. But I think we're on a tangent, but we always do.
No, it's like
it's a great one.
But Pleasure Island is like that. We're going with this, like, you're supposed to go in and wander and read the placards and wander into a place and follow the story.
I thought I was supposed to
line.
just get a drink.
That's the thing. That's what
That's what it became.
Like, I think we're going deep, but I think they almost took it a smidge too far.
Well, it begs the question: could they have done something differently during the day too? Because it was just shuttered during the day, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, more in part 2. But could those places have been turned into different types of entertainment complexes? Not like a Dave & Buster's, but I'm saying something that could go on during the day to entertain and give that exploratory feel to the area and interactivity and things like that. And that never materialized. It really was just the place to go later on when
the shops were open, but that was
but
that was really
there was a handful of them. After you just walk, what's here? That's a club. That's closed. The doors are closed. The doors are closed. Look, little confetti from last night. Okay, moving along. Nothing to see here.
All right, so let's go a little into each one of the complexes or the buildings. So first of all was the Empress Lily. Now, due to the proximity to the Empress Lily to Pleasure Island, the restaurant complex was actually opened up in 1977, as Brian said. As an addition to Lake Buena Vista Shopping Village, was retconned into the Pleasure Island story, with the idea that Pleasure purchased the boat in 1911 and used it as a houseboat while Pleasure Island, his living compound was under construction. Then there was a restaurant called the Portobello Yacht Club, which was an Italian restaurant operated by the Levy Restaurants. That was supposed to be the former home of the Pleasures, who had occupied it for 20 years. Now, the restaurant was on the boundary of the property, so that meant that it was actually accessible without having a ticket to Pleasure Island. So it became another eatery that you could visit while you were there. And I never got a chance to eat there, but Brian, I understand that one of your relatives did.
My sister and her family ate there. I remember when we took her kids for the first time. I must have come down on a separate flight or something and met up with them later, but they had gotten there early and gone to, at that time was Downtown Disney. And she's like, oh, we had dinner at the Portobello Yacht Club, and it was really good. And it was very weird back then for somebody to go someplace I'd never been. Because on all those trips, you get to a point where you've pretty much eaten in most every place except places you don't want to eat in when you go enough. And but she had good things to say about her meal there. She enjoyed it. It was typical Italian, higher end, medium to higher end Italian cuisine.
Right. I'm looking at one of the menus now. So they had things like, all kinds of different pizzas for an appetizers, of course, calamari, shrimp with prosciutto, lobster salads, filet mignon, so steaks as a main course, but also rack of lamb, some seafood, so grouper chicken. So really just kind of a pretty wide swath of things.
A continental restaurant with kind of an Italian theming, I would say.
Sure. Lobster ravioli and, spaghetti, a good wine selection, of course. And what I just found out from one of our listeners, this is really interesting. So this is from WDW Manimal, who is
Alan Bowers, our buddy Alan Bowers.
Another Bowers, not related.
Yes. Only in your heart. Only in your heart.
Yes, that's right. We are spiritually related. He told me. He sent me a piece of a book about Jim Henson's life, and actually the deal to sell the Muppets to Disney was actually brokered at the Portobello Yacht Club. in 1990.
Well, then there should have been a plaque out front that said that.
Should have been a plaque out front. For sure. So that's Portobello Yacht Club. Next to that was another restaurant called the Fireworks Factory, also run by the Levy Restaurant Corporation, focusing on barbecue, as Todd mentioned. And this was supposedly built from the remains of Pleasure's fireworks factory and laboratory, which was partially destroyed in 1927 when a spark from Pleasure's pipe set off the fireworks that were stored there. And what's interesting is that the interior design of the restaurant actually supported that story. So there were all these kind of like half brick walls where like the tops were blown away or sections were taken out of it. And then they would have things like strings of rockets, like hanging downs, and firework label styled posters.
We should probably add into this is the start of the themed restaurant fad era too, right? Your rainforest cafes. I mean, Hard Rock was already going.
Hard Rock, Rainforest. Hard Rock was really the original.
Yeah, you had
but Rainforest and Planet Hollywood, All-Star Cafe.
Right. Then you got T-Rex. There was a couple other ones in there that David Copperfield's Magic Underground. There were a few others that went belly up or only had a few locations. But that was a big thing, was creating these. There were a number out there that were trying to do this theming, and they were doing even a more complex story. I even remember they were such the rage that I had this place. I wanted to build one called Bombs Away, which was like, the wing was the bar was a wing of an airplane, and there's parachuters coming through the ceiling.
Yeah, and you had them around the country too. Spaghetti Factory and Outback. I mean, Outback Steakhouse is didn't have as much of the flair, but that the Australian theming and everything on the menu.
Texas Roadhouse. We throw the peanuts on the floor and we dance. Like, all right, fine. But
you've had a dance at Texas Roadhouse?
Oh my God! You never see them dance?
So
no.
if there's like a birthday, there's like a whole routine that they do.
They drag out a saddle and make the birthday person sit on.
Oh my God!
Oh yeah,
have you ever been there?
I haven't been there in years.
JT, I have to ask, have you ever been to Texas Roadhouse when the armadillo comes out and does meet and greets in the full costume?
No, I've just eaten there a couple times. Never seen any of this stuff.
Is that the holiday armadillo?
I'm the holiday armadillo.
The guy's in a Western outfit.
Now leave me alone and let me enjoy it myself. But I love a themed restaurants. These are so fun to me. This is great. Yeah, like Chi-Chi's. I didn't like the singing.
It's a celebration of food. Chi-Chi's.
Yes.
That I think you really would have liked this, JT, and I'm sorry that you missed out.
Sounds great. I'm looking at pictures now.
Yeah. So its signature drink was the 21 Rum Salute, which was a 21-ounce hurricane.
That's so fun.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, is there any mixer? In a hurricane, you got passion fruit juice, so there's a little bit of a mixer.
Yeah, a little bit of mixer, but probably an awful lot of rum. And I will say, overall, the drinks at Pleasure Island kind of stank. I mean, it was...
I guess I was giving them too much credit because there's not that much. This probably came from a mix, really.
Yeah, it was the 1990s. So the menu across the board, and certainly people I know have very fond memories of this, and they will disagree with me, and I'm probably kind of a drink snob. But I would say overall, the drink...
You are.
Well, okay, very much
it's like asking a sommelier, what bottle of wine should I get at the corner store? Well... there are good bottles of wine at the corner store. I'm sure there are.
Yeah, but how to the point of the restaurants at that point, it's also that was the mid 90s were the era of syrupy, gross colored drinks and sugary alcoholic beverages. It was
very part and parcel of the drink scene at that time. You were 100% right, Todd. It was exactly what was going on everywhere in America.
Yeah, you went to TGI Fridays, there was some hot red drink on the cover.
And that's the progression. And really, Disney was kind of at the beginning of it because, as we've talked in some prior episodes about, TGI Fridays was the one that started the whole, the frozen drinks at chain restaurants and not just at, fruity resorts on the beach somewhere, and appetizers and things. But Captain Jack's, that strawberry daiquiri was a big deal, and strawberry daiquiris were became a big thing in the early 80s at restaurants everywhere. Frozen strawberry daiquiris.
Bennigan's in the ground round.
The ground round, yeah,
the ground round and Bennigan's. Oh.
Did they show up to your table? Did this drink have the sparkler in it, or was that something else?
Yes, that is it exactly.
That's so
you
fun.
Actually you found a photo of that?
Yeah, it's very small. Somebody.
Oh, fantastic!
Walt
yes, they
Dated
would
World.
show up with sparklers in it. I know. I'm like, I never ordered it.
The next time we eat with JT, I'm absolutely bringing a sparkler to put in
Absolutely.
his drink.
But it's got to
Maybe we
match
could do
the
that for-
theme of the restaurant. This is so cool because it's fireworks. They probably had a box of fireworks in the back. They just making drinks with.
If it had 21 rums, how did that sparkler not set it on fire? Come on.
No, it had 21 ounces, not 21 rums.
All right.
'Cause 21 rums would have been fascinating.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
Brian,
a
are
little
you?
bit of each.
Brian's rifling through paper. I believe he's checking with the fire marshal for Retro Magic 50 if we can serve drinks with sparklers.
Or there's another fireworks factory brochure here. I have it's got like the black cat on it. The black cat fireworks. It's like very clever. I like that stuff.
Yeah, very good. Now the name of the restaurant is actually taken from an abandoned shooting gallery that idea that Tony Baxter proposed for Discovery Bay at Disneyland. So if you find the old artwork, there's this thing called the Fireworks Factory. And the idea was like, as you shot your electronic BB guns, that it would like set off fireworks on the side. So the name is a carryover from Discovery Island.
I have a write-up here I found, if you want me to read it, about the Fireworks Factory. It says, have a blast of a time at the Fireworks Factory. The Fireworks Factory offers a menu of great American barbecue and smoked specialties, fresh seafood, select steaks. Our high-energy bar features explosive drinks, including the American micro-brewed beers, select wines, and expertly blended specialty drinks with a bang.
There you go. Now, I did get to eat there several times. I did genuinely enjoy the barbecue, and it was, I know this is sound stupid, it was the first place I ever had like steamed squash, like summer squash.
Okay.
Which I found delicious, and I still love it today. But that was my first exposure to steamed squash. And I think at some point I was like, what is this? How do you make this?
So listeners, I want everybody to write in and explain when the first time that you had your first exposure to steamed squash.
Yeah, sometime.
Was it a family picnic? Was it a memorable
It's funny
birthday?
he mentions that because my vegetable memory with Disney is driving the first time with my friends. 1995, driving I-95 for 1,000 miles, and we stopped for dinner in the Carolinas at a Denny's, and one of the side dishes offered was fried okra. I had never heard of okra. I had never eaten it before. I had eaten gumbo, but I didn't know that was the vegetable in it. And I ordered fried okra with my dinner, and I'm like,
It's good
this
stuff.
is pretty good.
I just made gumbo tonight, so that's very timeful.
Well, there you go. So
Look at
that was a Disney trip where I got fried okra for the first time.
I'll say the Fireworks Factory has a very MGM Studios look to it, like the Backlot Express. It's like that corrugated steel walls, and it's that's the look it has. But it does say open 11:30 to 4 for lunch and 4 to 2 for dinner.
There you go. Now,
Stroll in there at 150. I'd like the porterhouse.
Give me the steamed whatever.
Can I get some lobster?
let's see. Actually, I had the menu from them too.
They have the Dynamite Barbecue Platter. I have one here, Hal.
Okay.
Cajun shrimp pasta, grilled pork chops, ribeye
There you go.
steak, smoked chicken, Pacific Northwest crab, Dungeness crab. Is that, am I saying that right? Dungeness, excuse me. Florida shrimp cocktail for Brian. Chilled rock shrimp with tropical salsa.
Ah, delightful.
It's the 90s. It has salsa.
Salsa. Now, to me, the most fascinating part of this was actually the men's restroom.
What? They themed it?
Well, here's the thing. So
If you're going to tell me sparklers went off in the urinals, I'm going to be really upset.
no,
You put a-
So I will say I have never been as terrified by a men's room as I was when I first entered the restroom there.
Is this
I gotta
before or
take
after
it.
the 21 rum salute? That's
Yeah, I bet, because I have been in some seedy restrooms in my life. Hal has led a sheltered life. If Pleasure Island was the scariest restroom he's ever been in.
steamed squash and scary bathrooms.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. So you walked into the men's room, and you step up to the urinal, and you're looking out, like, onto the bar, and there's like you're like looking through a glass window, and right on the other side of the glass window is like a 12-inch bar with seats and people sitting there drinking.
Can you
And you're
see?
like-
Can they see in?
Well, that's the thing. It's like I freaked out because I thought they could see me because I assumed it was just so I like zipped up and went outside and looked, and I realized it was a what do they call that?
Two-way
Magic.
mirror.
It was a two-way mirror.
Yeah.
So on the outside it just looked like a mirror, and then on the inside you could look out. And I was like, "Whew!"
Like 1989
Stall
Batman.
number 2, please.
Yeah.
Stall number 2.
And I guess the idea, I guess the idea was that you could leave, like say you met somebody, you could like have them sit there, and then you could go into the restroom, and while you're peeing, you could listen to them talking and seeing, how the date was going.
Or you make sure your date doesn't leave. Hey, I got to go to the restroom. I'll be right back. Exactly. You go in. Oh no! Come back.
And apparently this was a concept that was originally floated for the comedy club. And they didn't like it there, but they ended up putting it in the fireworks factory.
That's great.
It was real. I mean, honestly, it's so brilliant. I can't believe it never got used anywhere else again. That was really something. So yeah.
I feel really bad for people that have a shy bladder, where you need some privacy.
It'd be very challenging.
What's in the fireworks factory now? Is it still there? That building?
I mean, so much of it was totally knocked down.
Yeah, the whole island was reshaped. So.
Some of the buildings they did retain, but...
Yeah, so like Paradiso 37 and the Edison and Maria Enzo's, that they kind of kept the building and redid it, but they completely knocked down the Comedy Warehouse.
I remember being down there during construction, and basically that whole back side from... right after Adventures Club, all the way out to Empress Lily was just cut off from the water and flattened. There was nothing left. Essentially, Fireworks Factory is where the boathouse, the entrance was basically where a little bit in front of where that turnaround is for the aqua cars. That's where the entrance was.
All right, so that's it for. Where did we end? I think so. That's it for the fireworks factory. So we'll move over to Merryweather's Market. Now, this facility, which served as a food court when the island opened, was the original sail-making factory on the island. The food court was inside the boundaries of the island, so it was relatively short-lived, and it later became the Pleasure Island Jazz Company, and today its superstructure houses Raglan Road. So the building still looks kind of the same, at least from the aerial view, but on the street level, it's quite different. Mannequin's Dance Palace. Now, this multi-story dance club had a ridiculously layered story to support the theme of the club, which featured theatrical-style flying backdrops along with brightly dressed mannequins hanging from the rafters. Did you guys ever go into Mannequins?
I did go in there in '98. It was crazy.
You would walk. I remember like down the staircases because it was multi-level, and like suddenly there'd be this mannequin like on the side kind of lit up. I remember one was like a sequined like Peter Pan theme, and there was like a Captain Hook and a Peter It was kind of creepy.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. If you don't like that, it was. I don't know. I mean, I think we spent more time at the beach club. That's where we went.
Okay. So the facility was supposedly Pleasure's second sail-making factory, which was then converted into a motion picture studio, which it had the theatrical rigging and the costumes, and then it became a workshop for Maxwell's Demon, which was a steam and magnetic-powered locomotive, and that was the explanation for why the dance club had a revolving turntable floor. So it's like... they had to go 3 levels deep on the explanation of, okay, it's a large building big enough to make sales, but it also became a movie studio, which is why it has these costumes and stuff in it. But then it also has a turntable. Like, it's just overly ridiculous, I think, of by the time you get those many layers deep. It was a very cool experience, though. It was a 21 and up dance club. I thought what was really neat about it was the entrance experience. So you would walk up to the front, and it was an elevator that would take you up to, I think, the 2nd floor, maybe the 3rd. And, you kind of hear that muffled sound of the dance music outside. And then when the elevator doors opened up, It's like the full blast hit you of the music that was playing, and you would come in behind the DJs, and they had a very advanced DJ setup at the time. They spent a whole lot of money on the lighting system and the sound system. It was all state of the art. And then you would kind of move around the cage DJ area, which was above the dance floor, to find either go down and get a drink at the bar. But the revolving dance floor was a ton of fun because you could just sit there and watch people as they were trying to get off the floor, especially if they had a few drinks, like completely fall, like trying
just
to make
getting
that
on
transition.
the floor might be tough too.
Yeah, trying to make the transition from the revolving dance floor to like the still dance floor.
Todd and I are both looking at this photo that was put into the chat here, trying to figure out what kind of computers they're using to run this
oh yeah,
soundboard and lighting.
I'm sure for 1989 it was.
Look at the monitors, man.
Yeah, probably an Amiga or something like that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I will say the attraction for me was the revolving dance floor. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And they would also do the dancers. So there was this dance troupe called the Pleasure Island Explosion that would do stuff outside. But they would also come into mannequins, and above the dance floor on the second level, kind of in the back where you see like sort of the backdrop stuff, they would come in and do dancing stuff, like little mini shows up there while you were dancing down below. So it was a really, really innovative and really neat. Cool place to go dancing for sure. So that was Mannequins, and today it's Morimoto Asia. This one is a favorite, I think, because it only lasted in this incarnation for a number of months. So Zephyr's Rock and Roller Dome.
I love this.
Now, so what's interesting, I mean, God, there's so many interesting things about this. One interesting thing is the preliminary version of this was spelled ZEPHER''S. There are versions of it spelled out Zephyr with a pair of roller skates out in the wild, like on some of the preliminary stuff that came out. But in the end, it was spelled XZFR, and it had this very atomic logo on the side of the building, which was white with kind of like an atom and Zephyr inside the black lettering. This building contained a lounge, a dance floor, and a roller skating rink, which circled the second floor, which was fascinating. But again, this was part of the idea of like having something for the younger set to do. So I guess while you were dancing, or your kids could roller skate around it. I never got to do the roller skating, unfortunately, because the first time I went, we didn't go there, and by the time I had come back, it was closed. But like, what a wacky idea in hindsight! Like, nothing better than like roller skating and alcohol. I mean, I don't see how that could go wrong at all. So the idea in the story was that Pleasure constructed Building X, which is what the building was called, as a place to design and test his experimental X-Thing aircraft. And the shape of the building was somewhat suggestive of a wind tunnel. Supposedly in the story, after Pleasure's test flight, an antenna on the roof transmitted a message of welcome into space. So, taking this a step further, the house band that played in the dance section was called the Time Pilots. And the story was that they were a group of aliens who heard Pleasure's broadcasts from Earth, became fascinated by other radio broadcasts from the planet, and learned how to play our music. And then what they would do is why they were called the Time Pilots is each set they would do a different decade. So the first set of the night would be from the 1950s. Then they would come back and do a set of music from the 60s, and then the 70s, and then the 80s. So time. It's a very, very heady concept. The lounge area I remember going into a couple of times, and I thought it was very cool. It was very minimalist, white. They had a lot of posters from like 1950s science fiction movies in there. So like the Day the Earth Stood Still and stuff like that. And then the one thing that was really interesting, so remember when Pleasure Island opened up, smoking was still very prevalent in bars and restaurants. They had a system installed in Pleasure Island, in this bar that would actually suck the smoke up and get it out of your way. Wow. So if people were smoking in there, you didn't really notice it because it was immediately removed from the room, which made it a lot more enjoyable. So I don't know if there were other bars that utilized that system, but it was really remarkable how you didn't have that fog of smoke in that particular lounge like you did in a lot of other places. And I remember ordering electric lemonades in that particular bar. That was kind of...
That sounds so 90s.
The drink I like that.
So 90s electric.
It is. Now there's still a drink called Dad's Electric Lemonade.
Yeah, the 50s
that is available at Disney
Lounge.
MGM. Yeah, so I'm curious whether it was, a relative of or the same drink as they served back then. Okay. Let's keep strolling through the island. Let me pull up my notes here. Sorry, this is where I kind of have stopped doing my pre-writing, and I'm going to have to kind of wing it a little bit. All right. This was fun. So underneath Zephyr's Rock and Roller Dome, was a store called Doodles. And now, okay, so again, big entrances. So if you went to Zephyr's, you actually, and you still saw this when it became the Rock and Roll Beach Club later on, you would walk up to the front and then you would have to walk up 3 flights of stairs in order to get to the top. Do you remember that, Todd? Since you said you liked the Rock and Roll Beach Club.
I remember that. It was all outside and you had to go all the way up this, like, it was like a gangplank type staircase or fire escape almost on this side.
Yeah. So you had to trudge all the way up to the top in order to... So at the base of that staircase was a very small shop called Doodles. And they sold like a lot of graphic tees and some Pleasure Island merchandise later on, but it was really just kind of like a t-shirt shop. And the concept of that particular thing is that there was a relative of Pleasure's, his granddaughter Katie, who was a custom car builder, and that was her kind of like auto customization shop, and her nickname was Doodles, and that's why the store was called Doodles. And on the inside there were like car parts and things integrated into the display systems, so you saw like sort of like this machine shop car kind of theme inside, so it carried it through there. There was a custom clothing store, or not custom clothing. There was a off the rack clothing store. Kind of reminded me a little bit of like White House Black Market, because they had like one section of, white clothes and one section of black clothes. So I don't know if that store if White House Black Market was an inspiration for them, or if it just kind of happened simultaneously. The store was called Changing Attitudes. And the idea there was that it was an upholstery shop that was started by Pleasure, and they would actually do all of the yacht interiors, all the upholstery and things for that into there. So the idea of the cloth, led to the clothing store, and also within the fable of the island is where they stuffed the Yakus, who appeared inside of the Adventurers Club, which was this kind of yak moose hybrid creature that was there. So I guess they couldn't get taxidermy done anywhere else, so they had it done there. So they managed to tie in 2 things with that. Then there was a little bit up Hill Street, and actually Pleasure Island, it was built on a hill, which was very different for Disney. They didn't have a lot of, big changes of level, but you would actually kind of have to trudge up the street at Pleasure Island as you got there. There was a shop called Hammer and Fire, and it was a jewelry store. They had stoneware. They had some sort of like artsy craftsy stuff. That was supposed to be the fittings foundry from Pleasure Island. So again, things like, I guess, grommets and what are the things that you tie a boat off with?
The cleats?
The cleats, yes. So all of that stuff would have been made in this factory. And the thing that I kind of remember about this place they did this thing where they would actually have people be like live mannequins in the glass windows out front. And that was really different and unique at the time. So you would walk by and you would see what looked like mannequins in the window, and then you realize like, oh, these are actual people. And that actually would draw a really big crowd.
It's like the red light district.
Yeah. I don't know. It was a big thing. I had forgotten about it, and I saw someone mention it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. Like people would just stand in front of the window and stare at them. Is a kind of a big deal. On the other side of the street was the remains of the chandlery and tool crib, which was a store called Yesteryears. And that was kind of the first retro throwback sort of clothing store that I don't know, that kind of existed anywhere. So, they had a lot of sort of like old Disney themed t-shirts and clothes in there. Classic Mickey, but very unique. And next door to that was a place called Suspended Animation. And if you went to Pleasure Island at all, I'm sure, and were a Disney fan especially, you would remember this store. It was one of the only places in Florida at Disney where you could find Carousels and prints of Imagineering work. I ended up buying like a Jungle Cruise print there.
That's another 90s thing that was huge, was Carousels.
Yeah.
They really came out of nowhere.
So it was neat because they got a lot of the Disney Gallery stuff from California in there. So it was one of the few places at that time, especially, that you could buy any kind of Imagineering artwork. And it was a really neat store. They had this statue kind of set up in the window of the I don't know what it was done for originally, but it was kind of like a Norman Rockwell thing of like, was it Walt drawing Mickey or Mickey drawing Walt? But it was done as a statue.
Oh, okay. Was that the one in the Norman Rockwell style? Because I have the art.
Yeah.
I have it downstairs, and actually I have a copy of that, and I'm going to do a giveaway because I've never framed it. I have no use for it. It's still rolled up. I probably bought it there. So here's a contest for this month. Send your, what should we call it? JT, what should the AOL keyword be for this one? Rockwell. There we are. So send an email with the subject Rockwell to contest@retrowdw.com to win the Norman Rockwell Walt painting Mickey painting Walt poster.
There you go.
Great way to let it go.
So because it was a graphics store, this was supposed to be basically this is where like a R. North Campoporter, America's premier gold leaf stylist, like came to Orlando and spent his days hand painting the bows of the yachts that Pleasure Island refurbished. So they tied the graphics. They tried to try the graphics into there too. Next to that was Avigator's Supply, which sold kind of like adventure style clothing. So like stuff for traveling, like, I don't know, things that you wear on safari. They also had some logoed merchandise. This was supposed to be a building that was made for refurbishing ships and yachts. And then it was tied in somewhat to the Adventurers Club. And there's this story about how he invited a group of native Floridian stunt pilots who were called the Avigators to operate a import-export business out of there. And it had a really neat logo. It was kind of like this alligator with wings and props. So that was painted on the side of the building, and there was a bunch of merchandise that was released at that time that had the Avigators logo on it. And then you could also pick up some Adventurers Club merchandise there too. Videopolis East. We should talk about this. This is where Cage and 8 Tracks eventually ended up. When it first opened up, again, we're looking for places that kids can do things in Pleasure Island as well as adults. So this was actually an 18 and under club, sort of based on the name of Videopolis from Disneyland. In the story, this was supposed to be where Meriwether Pleasure's son Henry, who was quote unquote the mad genius of Lake Buena Vista, was setting up an artificial intelligence called the Pleasure Cellular Automation. And so inside of this club was a bunch of TVs that would play music videos, and they were just kind of attached by conduit and pipe all over the place. But this is supposed to be very computery and evocative of I guess, high tech stuff. They said when the building was reopened in 1987, the automation was alive and thriving, and it was the thing that was actually playing the videos that you were watching. So it was a kids dance club for a while. There were some neat special effects downstairs. I remember because it was again a multi-level club. Remember those it's kind of like neon tubes from the beginning of Spaceship Earth.
Oh yeah,
had, like the crackles. It had some of that crackle stuff downstairs, so you actually got to get up close and see it, because you weren't like stuck in a car far away from it. That particular dance place did not last very long. Allegedly, there were some I don't know how to put it. Some stabbings, I think, was the story that I had heard. Like inside, there's some.
Yeah, I tried to do some police blotter work on. I could not come up with anything, but I trust your memories of living local.
Yeah, they pay to keep that out of the papers, Todd. I mean, really, I think it was probably just part of the overall, redevelopment. But yes,
that reminds me of an ancient urban legend from the early days of like online message boards and stuff, that no one ever dies on Disney property. That if like remember the story was like if a guest drops dead in the Magic Kingdom or while in one of the Disney hotels, they would force the ambulance to take them off property before declaring them dead. Like that. Remember that?
SNL made a reference to it this weekend too.
Did they really?
Yeah, because they had Cuomo on, and Cuomo was talking about that they had Cuomo, but it was Cuomo in quotes about moving bodies to hospitals from nursing homes from New York, and he's like, "We're doing it like Disney does it. They move them out of the theme park."
Yeah, that was an urban legend back in the day.
That is hilarious. All right, this place was kind of big, Superstar Studios, and if there was also one of these at Disney MGM. So this was a place where you could go in and basically record yourself singing over kind of like karaoke CDs, and then you could walk out with the CD.
So was it just audio, or did they do music videos too?
There was also a music video one too, and I believe I don't know if I have. I never got to do it, but I know that when we went there, some of the people that were on one of our group trips did it. And I want to say, I know there was somebody within, our circle of listeners and friends on Twitter who did it.
Yeah, I know my friend, our friend, Megan McCoy, has posted a video of her and her brother performing something, but I don't remember if it's from Disney or if it was Universal doing the same thing at the time.
Oh, okay.
But it was definitely a video that they made on a trip to the theme parks,
right?
Where you did that.
Yeah. Now the place was actually operated by a company called Star Treks Enterprises, and this company also ran the version in Disney MGM too. So this was one of the few sort of leasees that were there. But I thought it was interesting that, Disney MGM and Pleasure Island basically opened on the same day. So it's funny that they got them into two locations.
Well,
at the same time.
It should also be for people who were fortunate enough to not be alive back then. This is a thing that happened in the 80s, that malls and vacation destinations, they certainly had them on the boardwalk where I went growing up. They would have sound booths, and as karaoke became a thing in the 80s, the availability of those karaoke tracks without having to pay someone to record them, these sprung up all over the place. As cheap recording equipment became available, you'd go into this little, it looked like a phone booth, and but usually a little bigger because they could accommodate 3 or 4 people if they wanted to entice a group, and for $10 or whatever, you could record yourself on an audio cassette singing a song, which you can do on your laptop now. But back in the day, that was not something you could do at home.
Yeah, I mean, here we all are talking into very nice condenser microphones, in the privacy.
Somewhere, I know where, there's a box out in the storage unit, but somewhere there is an audio cassette of me singing Yesterday. I was probably 15 years old, and that I did on the boardwalk one night. Studio One, it was called. And
there you go.
You would always open your recordings with, "Hi, this is Brian, live from Studio One in Ocean City." They had a script for you to, and then the song would start.
Oh, that's awesome.
I may have to dig it up. I haven't heard it in 20 years, but
yeah. So the story for this place is that it was built to store Isabella's Pleasure gargantuan collection of 78 RPM Italian opera records. So there was, again, they tried to have this reason for a music thing there, which is, it's just amazing the lengths that they went to in order to support this. All right, Comedy Warehouse. That was supposed to be the power station of the island. And then they say it became a storage facility when the island itself was electrified in 1928. Then it became the home to the Pleasure Island Thespian Players, which Isabella Pleasure also started, who was the wife of the founder, Meriwether Pleasure. And they would do historical pageants and plays and things. And then, the building was closed and disbanded. But that's why it has a stage, and that's why there's seating. And that's why, it's all set up for a comedy club, because, this was a facility where they did plays before. And we will talk in great lengths about the comedy club in another.
Yeah, I have. That's a place I actually went. So
yes. And there's a lot to talk about there.
Yes, there is.
All right. The Adventurers Club, another facility that really needs its own episode. For those of you that are somehow not in the know about the Adventurers Club, it was, I think, an absolutely wonderful sort of throwback to, that 1924 to 1930s, truly like sort of Adventurers Club or Explorers Club. And it had, oh my God, just such a wide variety of things. But the real big deal there was the live characters that would interact with you. Had multiple shows in multiple rooms, just a whole lot of entertainment, very Disney. Like I said, we'll get into lots and lots of detail of that. And the idea of that literally was that it was a house that was designed to hold Pleasure's personal library and his trophy and collection of things. And he opened it up as a club, and it remained as a club until the 1940s, and it was sealed. And then they basically opened up the doors and let people back in again. And somehow you're back in 1940. This is one of those things where it doesn't quite all come together, because I think you're supposed to be in the 1930s when you're in there, rather than in modern times. But who cares?
That's why it gets its own episode.
Exactly. And next to that was the Neon Armadillo, which was supposed to be Pleasure's greenhouse. It was a country and western bar.
Line dancing.
Line dancing. Live entertainment. They actually did a show from there later on that did air on a television network, and I can't remember which one it was. But
CMT.
Yeah, probably. But, this is one of those, actually, I will tell you, this is one of the places where it was originally scheduled they originally thought it'd be kind of an extension to the Adventurers Club. And that's that Madame Zafira, whatever you mentioned, Todd. Like, she was supposed to be a character. It was supposed to be this kind of combination of like the Adventurers Club and a magic club, probably styled somewhat after the Magic Castle in California. And then at some point they kind of said, no, we're not going to do the magic thing. And then a lot of the gags from that ended up in the Adventurers Club. So like Fingers the organ that plays itself, which is absolutely lifted from the Magic Castle, with the piano that plays itself there, and the bar stools that would sink while you were sitting at them, which ended up in the Adventurers Club, and the cabinet with the floating head in it, which ended up in the Adventurers Club. These were all supposed to be inside of a magic club that was there. At some point, they killed the idea of a magic club and decided to do a jazz club that would be in that location. And I don't know whether it was a Dixieland jazz club, much like Rosie O'Grady's. We'll hopefully find out what the details on that were. But the story is that Eisner went to Rosie O'Grady's and went into their country and western club and just saw how massive it was and how many people were loving it. And he came back to the team and said, "We are making this a country and western club." So we got a country and western club at Pleasure Island. So the idea behind the name is that this greenhouse, which had Pleasure's cactus collection, was shuttered, and when they opened it up again, the people discovered a family of armadillos that lived there, and so the club became the Neon Armadillo.
And the syndicated show that ran from there was the Countdown, Country Countdown. It was like a weekly show that ran 1992 to 1993, and it was syndicated, so it was on various UHF stations around the country.
All right, perfect.
That's awesome.
And they did have live bands here every night, and sometimes it was name talent, and sometimes it wasn't. But again, the emphasis on live entertainment, just like Zephyrs had a live band, they also had a live band here, and live music was really a big part of the initial Pleasure Island push.
You have a couple of those 21 rum salutes. You don't care what the name of the band is. So.
Probably not. Just real quick, a couple of the other things that were there. There was a store called the Island Depot, which was where you got your Pleasure Island logo T-shirts and things. And what's really fascinating about Pleasure Island when it opened, so this is before the Funmeister. If you look back at, if you look on eBay for any Pleasure Island stuff, a lot of times you'll see buttons and pins that just have representations of the architecture on it. And even the original Pleasure Island logo was kind of like these 3 buildings with an explosion behind it with just the words Pleasure Island. That was really what they had for marketing and merchandise at that point for the island. They didn't really have, anything to hang on it other than the architecture itself, which I think is what kind of led to, the eventual development of the Funmeister.
Who's the Funmeister?
Well, we'll get to that later on. So that's kind of the Mac Tonight kind of moon guy.
Oh, the Moon Man. Okay, that's his name.
That shows up. He is the Funmeister. And when we get to him, they have to retcon him into the Pleasure Island story because he was added later on.
Well, I know how they do that. They just make a plaque.
They make a plaque. That's right.
It's really tough, though, having that name from the outset. Like, what if you have a bad day? Like, you have an off day. You're not really feeling it. I mean, you're the Funmeister. You got no choice.
You got a head shaped like a moon. You gotta be.
You just gotta be there.
Yeah, they're both moon guys. So
okay.
Yeah, naturally it looks kind of the same. And then there was also a Disney. I think, did I already mention the Mouse House? That was like a Disney merchandise store. So that was there, and then kind of in between. Yesteryears in that same, there was a cappuccino shop called Desserts.
Yes, I remember that. A D apostrophe ZERTZ. I think it was.
Yes,
nice and zany.
Yeah, well, it was the extreme 90s.
Yes,
right. But here we are, 1989. This is before the arrival of Starbucks, everywhere. So if you wanted a cappuccino or an espresso or a coffee drink, this is where you could get it.
Dr. Evil's corporation hadn't invented it yet.
Exactly.
There's an Austin Powers reference for you all.
They had baked goods, and remember, I used to go in there to get cappuccinos because if after you had a long night there, You want to get a coffee drink before you drive home to wherever you need to drive.
Especially if you're driving home to St. Petersburg.
Yeah, well, I was driving home to Sarasota at that point. So that was a 2-hour drive at that. So
Give me a cappuccino and a tank of oxygen. I gotta get myself in shape here for the drive.
Yep.
Just had too much barbecue and 21 rum salutes.
Yes.
Gosh.
And then also another holdover from Disney MGM or something that opened at the same time was Cover Story, which actually had the same name as the shop at Disney MGM. And that was one of those places where they would put your picture on the cover of a magazine.
Okay.
Oh, like they do at the Exit to Imagination now.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the DreamWorks shop there, or ImageWorks, rather.
I mean, that was a very popular thing at all kinds of tourist places.
Same type of deal, 80s and 90s. That was a vacation destination thing. They did malls. There was always a stand. And that was really the outgrowth of laser printers coming online and, desktop publishing, image editing skills. And so that somebody made a simple program and they could put you on the cover of People magazine with a thing that says, Reader's Crown greatest kid ever. And they put a picture of your daughter next to it.
So that's Pleasure Island 1989. And you would think, you would throw open the doors of all this entertainment and all this excitement. And, you had a couple options for tickets. You could get a one club ticket, I think for $8, or you could get a 3 club ticket for $12.90. I actually have my 3 club ticket from the first time I went. Oh, and actually I'll show you. So here's the button from Pleasure Island. That's all architecture because people get super excited about architecture.
Well, that's what they're there to read, the plaques about the architecture and the backstory.
That's exactly. Right. Okay, so here's my one night 3 club pass.
Which 3 clubs did you go to?
Well, I will tell you, it was the Adventurers Club, the Comedy Warehouse, and Mannequin's Dance Palace.
Okay.
So I skipped Videopolis East. I didn't go to Zephyrs. I did not go to the Neon Armadillo because I'm not a country fan. Now, interesting enough, on this ticket was also the Baton Rouge Lounge, which was on the Empress Lily. Oh. So that used to be a place that you could just go, but they kind of put it into part of Pleasure Island, which is kind of fascinating. So persons under the age of 18 must be accompanied by a parent, excluding Videopolis. Mannequin's Dance Palace is restricted to persons 21 years of age or older. Appropriate dress is required at all clubs. Pleasure Island club hours are subject to change without notice. And of course, alcoholic beverages may not be removed from their place of purchase. So this was it. You could, like I said, kids were welcome everywhere except for Mannequins. And then adults couldn't go to Videopolis East. So, and I want to say, I don't have the price in here. I think it was $12 for a 3 club pass. Pleasure Island was not an instant hit. Whether it was the lack of advertising, maybe the story wasn't elaborate enough on the backstory.
More plaques. It needed more plaques.
Needed more plaques.
What are we doing wrong here?
Double the plaques.
It could have been the pricing, but like Pleasure Island was not a hit off the start.
Well, and you said, we talked a bit ahead of the show that you said back then a cover charge for a club would be $4 or $5. So
right. So if you went to a local, a bar in Tampa or Orlando probably had a $3 or $4 cover charge. Maybe the pricing was a little aggressive, but then look at all the entertainment you got. And actually, one of the things that we'll mention is outside of the clubs, like there was a ton of entertainment just out on the street
entertainment.
Too. Yeah, there was street entertainment. There was a band that wandered around on the outside. I mean, my God, you'd be in the Adventurers Club and like the band would literally come from the outside into the inside of the club and play and try to get you to come outside. So there was, I think, a lot of this idea of like that kind of Rosie O'Grady's thing of like, oh, this will be enough if we have a lot of entertainment and we make it, kind of engaging. It's like, that's, people they like that. They're going to like this. But they really, I don't know if it was a cost factor, because I'm sure it costs a lot of money to build this all at one time. And at that point, Disney always wanted to amateurize things within 5 years. It didn't work. It wasn't working. And so on our next episode, we'll talk about Pleasure Island 1.1 and the introduction of the Funmeister and New Year's Eve every night and all of the things that really made Pleasure Island click.
And probably things a lot of the listeners remember too, because this 1.0 didn't last too long. So
it did not. It lasted basically it opened up in May 1st of 1989. By April of 1990, Videopolis East was gone. I believe the roller skating was gone out of Zephyr's Rock and Roller Dome, and it became Zephyr's Rock and Roll Beach Club. And yeah, there were new mixes. Some of the stores are out. An arcade came in. There was a bit of a change to try to rejigger it and actually make Pleasure Island profitable.
A lot of work they needed to do. So, well, thank you, Hal, for taking us through that. It's certainly starting to bring back memories, and obviously Lenny and the Magic Bee came out as a story, so I've important story in the annals of
Does he know Zippy the Spoon Boy?
Lenny might know it. The great thing is that we have artwork of Lenny, so people might want a Lenny the Frog t-shirt. All right. So with that said, speaking of different artworks and things, how you got some new T-shirts out there. Our famous or soon to be famous NBA style Polynesian logo is out there. I'm hoping you're going to make this a series, because this little abbreviation PVR. Are you going to make this kind of a series of resort tees?
So we'll tell the backstory. So when the NBA went into the bubble at the Disney resorts, we found I think we purchased a brochure from the Polynesian promoting the luau. And lo and behold, they used this artwork on the cover that looked remarkably like the NBA logo.
Yeah.
It was split in half, 2 colors. It's like you look at it and first thing I thought of was NBA.
Yeah.
And now, unfortunately, the Polynesian was not part of the NBA bubble, but it was just so close. There was no way we couldn't make the connection. And so we joked about making shirts with that logo in the style of the old NBA logo. And so we did it.
It looks great. Yeah. So,
and we will work on, we found some similar artwork from the Contemporary at the time that was used on bags. So we're going to expand the line out, and we'll have our kind of like sports line.
I love the style, because it's got the 3 letters, kind of like an airport code. It's like.
I will add how that whoever designed this might have got inspiration, because the NBA logo as we know it now came out in 1969. So.
I'm willing to bet that when that came out, it was pretty hot.
Yeah,
it was probably a big deal and very influential. So I would not be at all surprised.
All right, and. On our media front, we've had a whole bunch of new videos be added. We added a home movie from Epcot Center, September 1983. It's actually a video. We did some videos that we did on our latest movie night, Polynesian Contemporary Resort, from November 1987. And we've got Living with the Land with a live narrator, and the Fantasy Follies stage show, which actually has the stage going up and down too, which is a great rare find.
Excellent.
And then, again, also on the media front here, Brian, you put some slide carousels together. The Hyatt Regency Grand Cypress is a fantastic one. And I think you had another one in there since we last chatted, too. I can't remember.
Added a couple, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of great things. So, as always, sit down and take a look at our archives of photos and everything. So
the Hyatt Regency Grand Cypress I did a whole article on, because it's the first luxury, it was first 5-star resort that opened in the Orlando area. It opened in 1984, and that it said that the Eisner team stayed there to get some inspiration for the deluxe resorts like the Grand Floridian that they would build after the fact. But there's a whole art, and this set of slides was taken about 6 months after the resort opened. So it's a really neat glimpse at it, and gives you a little bit of the history of what life was like off property back then.
Yeah. All right, and as always, thank you very much to everybody for listening. If you can, give us a shout out on iTunes if possible, or wherever your favorite podcasting app is. If they've got ratings, give us a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, by all means, you can email us at podcast@retrowdw.com. We look forward to bringing you Pleasure Island Part 2 next month. Hal is going back into his research bunker. He will not be heard from for approximately 28 days until we record once again. So please understand there might be some delays in his response time. But anyway, with that, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time as always. And thank you to all of our listeners. And we'll talk to you next month. With that, Brian, take us out.
Follow the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society on Twitter and Instagram at LBV History and on the web at lbvhistory.org. Follow Todd McCartney and Retro WDW on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Retro WDW. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com. On Twitter, follow our web designer Jason Bartell of Deepwater Studios at JasonDWS. Our announcer, Andre Gardner, at Andre Gardner, and follow our hosts, Hal Bowers, on Twitter and Instagram, at GoAwayGreen, and on the web at kingdomofmemories.com. For JT Cougar on Twitter, at LS1JT, on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring, and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, at Brian P. Miles. Retro Disney World is the monthly podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, a nonprofit, nonpartisan, tax-exempt 501c3 organization, and is not affiliated in any way with the Walt Disney Corporation or any of its subsidiary or affiliated entities. Onward and upward.